Chapter 3. Georges Bizet. Was it really by chance that Georges Bizet completed his first draft of Carmen in the summer of 1874? Did the summer not make it so? Georges could smell the oranges of Seville from his study just outside of Paris, perhaps even deeper primordial callings from the Chinese grapefruit of Southeast Asia, the oriental tones of the other in Carmen. Yet the Parisian suburbs of the 19th century, along with Bizet's decision to never write religious music again, 1858, filled his sense of Spain with wine, tobacco, blood, and lust. Georges followed his eyes as eagerly as he would his nose, tracing the iron piping of the Parisian sewer system, spanning miles and miles until one could hear the scurrying of rats. But then a few meters farther and his senses would enter the marketplace. The sound of a woman's heels, the new dresses being worn, beauty parading itself through the advent of the sewing machine and the new mechanical shoemakers. But the world just beyond Western Europe, this was what Bizet could feel too. Bizet, sitting in his study, let the whole world in, the exotic, the mystery, the fantasy, the danger, the traveling, the sexual license. A Middle Eastern woman somewhere in a dank tavern with her veils, jewels, bronzed beauty, and alluring dancing, the gypsies, the fishermen. On returning back to France from across the Mediterranean Sea via a leaping mullet, his mind wanders. His vision continues to travel along land until he is stunned by the many chunks of grass and soil that shoot out from the ground due to a kicking bull in distress slain by a sudden escotada, the thrust of a bullfighter's sword. All this in one moment, one breath, the unapproximated distance and presence of experience. Between the satellite image and the microscope, man was never endowed with the capacity to know how close or how far he was in relation to the universe. He would never be able to measure it, but only be able to record it. The two main characters in Carmen are stuck so intimately together that they cannot discern where one begins and the other ends. But the outside is always calling. Don Jose draws back from his embrace. He hears the trumpets calling the soldiers back to work. Everyone sooner or later hears the trumpets. Bizet's experience was never articulated, only perhaps expressed in the rising and falling of his notes. Influence may be charted, documented, and historicized, but inspiration is impossible to pin down. Our Western civilization has the profoundly banal ability to quantify the purely qualitative experience of life into galleries, museums, the paraphernalia of a culture that is always one step behind true experience. In the real world, Bizet died without true recognition, with an abscess in the windpipe, preoccupied by bouts of mental depression, doomed to become one of those indifferent, static objects included in the Grand Museum of Life. We should remember the leaping mullet, the escotada, and if you cannot remember, take a listen on your record player for yourself. Marie Callas encountered the ghost of Georges Bizet 91 years after his death, when she agreed to record the entirety of Karma in 1964. Of course, she had sang parts of Carmen before, a few preludes and habaneras here and there, but what does one brushstroke amount to in a Renoir? Bizet and Callas were brought together through circumstance, but there were more other salient connections. Both suffered deterioration of the lungs and throats. Both had similar mood swings. Both were destined to have a heart attack relatively young. You could say they were brought together by misfortune, and this was their own fortune. Champagne is also what connects Georges with Maria. Maria was extremely fond of champagne, and she would drink champagne in her intermissions, and of course at the fashionable Rome nightclub Circolo degli Scacchi. Georges Bizet's Los Toreadors would start playing at every major Formula One event alongside the spraying of champagne in the 1990s. It is raining. Maria Callas, the voice of imperfection, is singing Bizet's Carmen to herself softly through the streets of Paris, or is Carmen softly singing through Callas? She is meeting up with the general director of the next opera she is starring in. She has already decided that she will not like them. We are then transported into a split second where Maria thinks about her mother and sips her 4th cup of coffee. She was a prolific coffee drinker, too. Suddenly, she is on stage performing at the Paris Opera. Abruptly, she becomes exhausted. The tenor, noticing that Maria is tired, intentionally holds on to his notes longer than Maria can to hide her instability. By the end of the performance, when the curtains come down, Maria collapses and is carried unconscious to her dressing room. I am listening to Maria Callas sing Bizet's Carmen, driving through a world unknown to both of them. I think about Georges and Maria, and then Isabel, Benji, and even Professor James Macaulay. I think about how all these singular, unique lives traverse space and time and find a sanctuary in my fugitive soul through the magic of recorded sound and personal memory. The windshield wipers push the stubborn raindrops away as they assault my window. Were the wipers enthusiastic at first when the rain came down, eager at the task at hand? Had they since become bored, pushing the rain away with a sense of indifference? Another silly question of mine. The cement road keeps rolling underneath my car. Different lights from different places, moving through each other in all directions and dimensions, refractions of different signals passing through the interfaces of varying mediums, carrying information, momentarily caught in the waves of my car radio, the electric pylons in an adjacent field, the cables underneath. What a kingdom we have made. And all this contained within my atomistic little car. My solipsistic consciousness, traveling through the anxiety motorway of our age, driving into giant gaping dark tunnels, picking up a second skin of fear so pertinent in our life, which manifests as strange tics, stutters, reflexes. Yet I want something else. The desire to want to explode into white light upon everything and become so enthralled within a spectacle that I am the spectacle. To be right there on the head of a pin of a moment, mixed with all the blood, sweat, and tears the world can muster up. Warm floorboards, a sudden rise of laughter within me, alcohol rushing up toward the head and heart, allured, eager, anticipating. I feel this in me, and I feel it now in Maria Callas, Georges Bizet, Carmen, the production, the audience. I soak myself in the aura of geniuses. I want to be a human being, inspired.